perfect. Hi, this is David Sweet, and you're listening to the Lake Forest Podcast.
Simple. Welcome to the Lake Forest Podcast, the podcast about the lovely city of Lake Forest, featuring topics like local news, sports, music, people, and food. My name is Pete, and I'm joined by my co-host, Skoo Walker. How you doing, Skoo?
Doing good, Pete. How are you today?
Oh,
On a Friday.
I'm doing great on a Friday. You know why I'm doing good? Because I live in Lake Forest just like you do. And Dave. All right, this show's got a sponsor. Neuro Noodle. Get a doodle of your noodle. If your kids play sports, we're getting back in the swing of things. If they take a tumble and that melon gets squished, you want to have a baseline to compare it to. I don't know if squished is the right word. We might have to edit that out in post. Visit neuronoodle.com. They get a physical every year. We'll get their brain checked out every year. Visit neuronoodle.com. Okay, one of the goals of the podcast is to shed light on local people doing good. And today we're joined by David Sweet, author of 3 Seconds in Munich, the controversial 1972 Olympic basketball final, and Lamar Hunt, the gentle giant who revolutionized professional sports. Let's chat with David and see what's new. David, thanks for coming on the show.
Well, thanks so much for having me, Pete and Skoo. It's great to be here.
Now, you two know each other. Skoo, how do you know Dave?
Oh, Dave and I go way back to Little League.
He struck you out, huh?
Yeah.
I don't know about that.
I don't think so. You were on the West Park team, right, Skoo?
That's right. Yeah, West Park.
And I was on the South Park team, so yeah, we were bitter rivals.
It was fun back then. Not like anything today, though.
Wait, there's an actual South Park team?
Yeah. Travel All-Stars for Little League and up to Pony League was South Park and West Park.
Yeah, I never quite made the Travel All-Stars, but I was on the level below that.
But they also used to have all the baseball segregated by where you live. So you played at your respective parks.
Yeah, exactly.
So Dave, you grew up in Lake Forest. What's your story? I know we're neighbors, but you grew up with Skoo. You must have been here a long time. Jeez.
Yeah, I'll give you a quick summary. I grew up here and loved it. Loved playing baseball and a lot of different sports. And then after college, I moved to Los Angeles, went to USC for journalism school, and was a sports editor out there for a daily newspaper. And then I joined the Wall Street Journal in New York, right when they launched their internet site in 1996. Mm-hmm. Wrote for them for a number of years, worked at Sports Business Journal, a trade publication. And then my wife and I moved back here in 2003. I knew it was a great place to raise kids, and we had a daughter in New York. And I worked at the Lake Forester for about 9 years. That was a lot of fun, profiling local residents. Started the North Shore Weekend soon after that. And then as you mentioned, I've written a couple of books during all this, and also just started a new blog, or helped to start a new blog for the city of Lake Forest.
Oh, what's the name of the blog? Let's give a little plug-a-roo.
Sure, it's called Lake Forest Love, and it's lakeforestlove.com. And in fact, today we posted a great story about the Lake Forest High School sailing team, which is going to be at Nationals this weekend in Cleveland. And they're battling teams from across the country, from Rhode Island, California, and all sorts of places. So it's fun to get a little story on them. I talked with Will Howard, and he's the director of the program. And it's hard for me to remember, despite my long ties here, a team going for a national championship out of Lake Forest. I know we've gone for state championships, but national is pretty big.
Stu, your daughter's in the boats. Didn't she just do something in Michigan? Had a championship trophy, something?
Yeah, she rows for Chicago Rowing Foundation, and they just her boat won the Midwest Juniors a couple weeks ago.
Congratulations, that's great.
Thanks. And Will does a great job with the sailing program. When they brought him in, he just took it to a different level. And he's a great guy and does a wonderful job.
Yeah, it really sounds like it.
We got to get him on the show.
And then the, you know, for the kids as well, he does an excellent job
Oh.
teaching them how to.
Absolutely.
So Dave, I already know the answer to this, but when you're in town, you know, we try to give out a little small business love. Where do you like to hang out, have a bite to eat? Should we give Beth a shout out, even though she never comes on the show?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I do like to go to the Lantern or Chiefs. Francesca's is fantastic. Pasquazi's, I think, is open again. If I, you know, I love their hot dogs and sloppy joes. You know, I think they closed for a while, but I'm pretty sure they're open again. Yeah, and our house is sort of near Highwood, so I go to a few places there as well. No need to name them on a Lake Forest show. Yeah, there are, you know, plenty, and I'm really excited for La Colonial to open. I think it's next year that'll be in town.
Yeah, we can deal with that awning. I think we finally got that approved. It's okay to be blue.
Right.
So Dave, how'd you get started in writing? Was it
Uh,
Lake Forest High School or what before that?
That's a good question. I didn't go to the high school. I went to a place called Deerfield Academy in Massachusetts. And I'd say I had a really great teacher there who sort of got me started into writing. I really enjoyed writing a long, not an essay, it was almost like a thesis. It was fairly long on Henry Wadsworth Longfellow, the poet. And I really enjoyed doing all the research and finding out all about him and writing it up. And then at Denison, where I went to college, I was an English writing major and more into fiction at that point. But my career has really been in nonfiction. And you know, there's just so many interesting stories in Lake Forest and out in the world. I really enjoy interviewing people, conducting the research and putting it all together in an article or a book form.
So you started with Lamar Hunt. How did you pick him? I didn't see anywhere in your background you hung around Missouri.
Yeah. Well, he actually, ironically enough, he was mainly in Dallas, even though he owned the Kansas City Chiefs. He started the team as the Dallas Texans, and then the Cowboys came in, and you know, Dallas couldn't really host two pro football teams, so he decided to move to Kansas City. I just thought he was a fascinating guy. By the time I wrote the book, he had passed away, and I had interviewed him a couple of times before, but can't really say I knew him. But you know, to start a professional football league, to merge it with the NFL, he coined the term Super Bowl. He helped start Major League Soccer, and he was very involved with the North American Soccer League before that. He was the father, really, of the 2-point conversion in the NFL, which you know, many coaches and others really didn't want. They didn't want to make a decision like that with the game on the line to go for an extra point or a 2-point conversion. And he was just, you know, obsessed with sports, and which I've been in many ways too. And he just seemed like a fascinating guy, a real entrepreneur. Just a little bit of background. His father was H.L. Hunt, who at one point was the richest man in America from oil money. And Lamar Hunt started this football league. He was only 27 years old. So, you know, to do something that big at that age, I thought was incredible.
It's a little bit more than what I've done. What about you, Skoo?
Absolutely.
How long did it take you to write that book?
I do these books fairly quickly, and both times I've written them, I've had full-time jobs at the same time. Lamar Hunt, you know, I was so passionate about it. I'd say I was able to figure it or do it all within 6 months or so.
Wow.
And I interviewed probably, I think it was about 36 people, including big names like Paul Tagliabue and Marty Schottenheimer, who coached for the Chiefs, and then a number of others. Gale Sayers, I interviewed him because he had been drafted by the Chiefs, but then he chose the Bears instead. So yeah, you know, when you're passionate about something, it makes it a lot easier.
And then 3 seconds. How'd you pick that? I mean, that's fascinating, but how did you stumble into that? I mean,
yeah. Well, that's a good question. I was talking with a New York agent and trying to pitch him story ideas, and through research, I mean, I remembered this game, and through research, I just found out how compelling it was on so many different levels. So you have the terrorism of the 1972 Olympics, which most people remember it for that reason. 11 Israeli athletes and coaches were killed by Palestinian terrorists. And then after that, the games went on, and the U.S. had never lost a basketball game in the Olympics going back to 1936. And then through, as I write, through corruption and why I say corruption is the main reason, they lost to the Soviet Union 51-50 because the last 3 seconds were played 3 times, and the Soviets kept having chances to win it because the head of international basketball kept putting time on the clock, which he has no authority to do because the referees are supposed to control the game.
Wasn't he sitting in the stands and he would run down?
Yeah, he and he's supposed to be a neutral arbiter, and he kept running down and saying, nope, there's not 1 second left, there's 3 seconds left. Nope, that play didn't count because the clock wasn't set correctly. And the Americans had basically won twice. And then on the last play, the Soviets got a basket and won. And finally, you have the element of the US players, all 12 of them rejected their silver medals. And they have to this day, and some of them in their wills have said their descendants can't accept the silver medal. So there's so many different parts to it. I mean, you have the evil of terrorism, the corruption, the heartbreak of the loss, and the principle of rejecting the medals. So many different levels that I really found fascinating.
Well, plus they weren't professionals. They didn't have Walton, right?
Right. Yeah, that was unfortunate. He was the best player in the land, and he had a bad experience in 1970 playing for a U.S. team. He couldn't stand the coach, and he was almost, I guess maybe anti-American might be too strong, but he wasn't patriotic is an easy way to put it. He didn't have any interest in playing for the U.S. team in 72. And the team was coached by Hank Iba, who at that point was 68 years old. He had won a couple of championships.
Is it Kentucky?
Oklahoma State.
Oklahoma State, okay.
He had won a couple of championships there in the 1940s, and he had won the 64 and 68 gold medals for the team, but he had retired from coaching in 1970. So he could have been the grandfather of these guys, and he was very set in his ways. He said, you got to throw the ball pass the ball 4 or 5 times before you shoot. And players were like, well, that gives the defense a chance to set up. Why we should run and gun more. Anyway, so, it was a heartbreaking loss. And if Bill Walton had played, I'm sure they would have won. But to this day, the players, I talked to 8 out of the 11 still alive, and you can tell to this day, it really pains them that they lost that game.
Why was it that close?
Well, that's a good question because, the U.S. had won every Olympic game they played in 63 straight at that point. And the Soviet, I'd say one reason is because Hank Iba didn't believe in scouting the other team. So there's a player on the Soviet Union, Sergei Belov, who Tom Henderson of the U.S. had never seen play before. And he just torched the U.S. I think he ended up with about 20 points, if memory serves, of the 51.
So Henderson was the center. So you have Tom Henderson versus Bill Walton.
Tom Burleson was the center.
Burleson, okay.
This is Tom Henderson,
Got it.
Sergei Belov. And the U.S. was really sloppy at the start for the whole first half and really for most of the game. And finally, with 5 minutes to go, a player named Kevin Joyce during the timeout said, look, let's play our game. Let's run and gun. Let's move around. We got to change the pace of this. And all of a sudden, they came back. At one point, they were down by 10 in the second half. And by the time, Doug Collins stole the ball with 10 seconds remaining, they were only down by 1 point at that point.
Is that Illinois State's Doug Collins?
That is, exactly. Yeah. And he, he stole the ball. The Soviets didn't even have to pass it, but he stole a Soviet pass. And then he ran down the court and laid the ball up. He missed the shot, and he pretty much went over the Soviet player and just pounded his head on the court and went under the basketball stanchion. He had 2 free throws, again, down by 1 point, and he switched both free throws, the most pressure-packed free throws you can imagine. And at that point, the U.S. was up by 1, 3 seconds left. It seemed like they had the game won.
Skoo, you want to hop in? I'm hogging everything here.
No, I'm just fascinated listening to the history of it.
This is quality stuff. This is like a real podcast, Skoo. So let's just say 20 years or so, you wrote the first book, and then you wrote this. This one came out last year during COVID?
2019.
2019. With all the technology, was it easier? Not that it's ever easy, but to get that book together and put out versus 20 years ago? Like, what was the difference putting a book out then and now?
Well, Lamar Hunt was 2010, and 3 Seconds in Munich was 2019. But I'll say,
so 10 years.
Yeah, not a huge difference, but I'd say the fact that I've written 2 books in this century, let's say, the key for me has been access to the internet, which when someone writing a book in the early 90s would have no access to. And to conduct research via looking at old newspaper archives via the internet, or YouTube items where clips of the '72 Olympic game I found on YouTube. And the internet is just so helpful to conduct research, and also to find people, figure out where they are, to contact them to request interviews.
I think where I was going with is on the distribution. Like, if Skoo and I wanted to write a book, oh my God, I don't know, what would that be? Manners and etiquette. But I mean, if you want to put it on Kindle for a digital book, I mean, fine, you don't edit it that well. I don't know if anybody will buy it, but at least you can put it out there and have the option to distribute it, right?
Well, that's a good point. Yeah. And so it is an ebook as well, 3 Seconds in Munich. It's also an audio book, which have become more and more popular. So yeah,
that was my download yesterday.
Oh, was it? Okay. Yeah. Well, the first one, maybe.
That nickel's on me.
Yeah. So yeah, there are many different ways to distribute a book these days. So that helps too.
Got it. So the newspapers, so you went to Forrester. Now, I've only been here 3 years. You and Skoo been around 57, whatever it is. I'm learning the ropes here. How do you're right, you're doing a blog. Do you think any of these local papers will stick around in the next 5-10 years, or it's just going to be all?
They're in pretty bad shape, I'd say, compared to, let's say, 30 years ago. The Lake Forester was much more robust, and there's a newspaper called the News Voice at that time that has folded. The North Shore Weekend, which I helped start, was a lot bigger when we started in 2012. The Lake Forest Leader, I think it was called, that was distributed free to people's mailboxes. That's gone now. So I mean, Patch doesn't really have much Lake Forest news. This area really needs something more robust. I mean, there have been really important city council meetings that haven't been covered, so no one really knows what they're voting on and so forth. But with Lake Forest Love, with that blog, we're not oriented. We're really focusing on profiling the interesting people in town and the great programs like Lake Forest Sailing. And so that's more our focus, sort of more features and profiles. But the place really needs a good news site as well.
Yeah, that's why I bring it up, because it's kind of why Skoo and I started this podcast. It's all the information is so centralized in silos.
Right.
East Lake Forest has one silo of information. West Lake Forest has another silo. I got involved with the caucus, and there's thoughts on being in the caucus, not being in the caucus. What is the caucus? How is the government run?
Right.
There's a period of time where people don't get I don't know if people want to know, but for the people that do want to know, we're trying to be transparent and put the information out there so they know what's going on.
Yeah, no, this is really valuable what you're doing. It's great. You're interviewing people around town and getting their thoughts out there. And I don't know if you guys are thinking about putting up a website as well and maybe covering events, but that would be fantastic too.
Yeah, and I tell you, the Lake Forester, Pete, when we were growing up, you used to wait anxiously every Thursday for that to come out, because it did have everything that was going on from a news, social, sporting, everything was in there. Exactly. And just over time, it just got thinner and thinner and thinner. But even though when it went to the internet, it's still, people still were pulling that thing, waiting for it, but there was just nothing in it anymore.
Yeah, and when
I get back to that.
Yeah, when I was there, I tried to keep it Lake Forest oriented as much as possible, because I knew people didn't care about Northbrook or Mundelein.
Right.
But I think these days, there with so much cost cuts, they barely have anyone to cover the news. So the default is to throw in all these regional stories that most people don't really care about.
Well, when
there's so much going on here too in the city and Lake Forest, Lake Bluff. So much news that you can fill up a periodical.
Yep, no doubt.
Well, there's so much talent in this town. Take Arthur Miller and Carol Summerfield. Having them come on and tell. Like, I'm new, so I'm like, my eyes are like this when I'm hearing what's going on in Lake Forest. All this information is there. People are moving in every couple years. To be able to share that in this type of environment, I think is there's some value there, because newspapers were built on politics, okay, and people try to stay away from politics. My thoughts on it is this environment, depending on which side that you're on, respect each other's view, but there is a view, okay?
Right.
We don't have any right to how somebody else perceives information, but they have their view. And when you have somebody that has one point of view one week, and then you have it the other side the next week, it can be quite the ping pong match. Whereas the newspaper, it's here it is. I don't know if it's as personal. Right. So I don't know how much more politics we're going to do, Skoo.
And to your point, one thing that's missed is I'm pretty sure the Lake Forester has stopped endorsing candidates, and for voters, you need to know who the Lake County candidates are and what the paper's view is on them, along with state representatives and so forth. For Lake Forest, it isn't as essential, maybe, because sometimes there are candidates running unopposed many times, but I think this year there were candidates who were opposed, and it would have been good to have a newspaper explain why they support this candidate and not the other.
Well, I think that's what we're going to try. Tongue in cheek, we're not going to have politics. We're always going to have politics depending on when the season is. But, when you have these contested elections and you have somebody that's running against to what the caucus put out there, and they didn't know there was a caucus, that just drives me crazy. So it's Lori Fitzgerald, you listening out there? She was running on for the school board and didn't know what there was a process to be a part of. And to me, that if this podcast can at least accomplish that one goal, to give people the information that, look, there's a process in place where people are interviewed before they go up for boards. That's how I got started. And depending on the week, Skoo is always the good guy. Skoo is always the good. Pete's always the bad. Pete's the Republican. Pete's the bleeding heart liberal. Pete's the whatever it is. It's my fault, but Skoo always comes out smelling like a rose.
That's how it works when you've been around town that long. You make a lot of friends.
So walking around town, it looks like we're getting back to normal, guys. 7 o'clock this morning. Starbucks is packed. Mary at Gerhardt's was packed. Those damn bicycles flying around. Looks like we're getting close to normal.
I was kind of upset at 5:30 in the morning. I saw all these people walking around. I'm usually empty with me and my dog. It's definitely opening up.
Yeah, it's so great. I mean, and especially this time of year when everyone wants to be out and about with the excellent weather, it's perfect timing.
Hey, David, you're and we can cut it out or however you want to do it, but you're pretty high profile in the media world. And what is your take on all the noise going on out there with the news, the non-news, all that stuff?
Well, when you say the noise, what if you could be more specific?
Who to believe, who not to believe, what channels you're listening to, what you shouldn't be listening to, and just
right.
All the different. It just seems a lot different nowadays.
It is. It definitely seems more partisan to me. Having read newspapers for so long, and there is fake news out there and so forth. Maybe because I work there, I really like the Wall Street Journal. I feel like they have interesting story topics that I don't find in most newspapers, and I feel like they're fairly reported. Whereas, certain papers you come across, I just think the reporter has an axe to grind, or, isn't giving you all the information that's out there. I'd say compared to, let's say, the 1980s or something, it seems more, the reporters they're more openly partisan, I guess I'd say.
Are they not doing the legwork, do you think, or is it just, superficial stuff?
They may not be doing the legwork. They may sort of have preconceived notions of what they're going to write, and just sort of build. They'll have the narrative first and then sort of build around it. It's interesting to your point. How did we mention COVID-19? How did we get the coronavirus? And now it had been mentioned, obviously, and sort of scoffed at that it could have come from a lab in China, but now everyone's reevaluating that and saying, it really could have. So, stuff like that. I think some people just had a preconceived notion like, oh, no, it didn't come from a lab, it came from a bat, or whatever the theory was. But you just can't dismiss certain stuff without sort of really digging into it.
Do you think when you went to school and the kids coming out now, you mentioned the legwork, journalism, there's so many different outlets now that people are willing to, I don't want to say lower their standards. Do you see that coming out? Because you just said, confirmation bias, preconceived notions, sloppy reporting. Do you see more of that now than when you came up in the biz?
I'd say yes, but mainly because there are so many outlets now. So you have a lot more people writing and editing and so forth. Mainly, I'd say, and in fact, principally because of the internet. Anyone can start their own blog and have their opinions out there. So they aren't as professionally trained as in the past, which is unfortunate. It's a different world, and it's good to have varying voices and more voices, but then also on the downside, the quality usually is not as good.
Like this podcast, Skoo. We have our fact checkers. We check.
A whole bunch of them. Just read our email.
We flunked out of host school. Dave, what's the next book you think?
Well, that's an interesting question. I did finally get a New York agent. My first two books didn't have an agent. I pitched them on my own. And she pitched a book about sports betting, legal sports betting, which has become very prominent in the U.S. Since 2018, when the Supreme Court ruled it could be legalized, outside of Nevada, really. And I think, almost half the states have legalized at this point, including Illinois. There wasn't any interest, or I shouldn't say that. They were very nice about it. The publishing houses thought I was the right guy to write it, but they didn't think it would sell much. So I think, if there was a scandal to tie it to, in the next couple of years, then they might be interested. But beyond that, I'd love to write another book. If that one doesn't come through, that's fine. I'm always looking for something that's really interesting to me to write about. And as you can tell, it's usually sports oriented. So
yeah. Well, Skoo's a big sports guy. He might have a few ideas for you.
Yeah,
definitely. The biography of Jerry Krause and his blowing up the Bulls.
Oh my gosh!
We'll edit that out in post, or maybe we'll keep it.
It's amazing, just on that topic. We all remember the great '90s and the Jordan years, but my God, in the last 23 years, I guess they have not done much.
No, and you said the key word 23.
Yeah, exactly. He was the key. I mean,
he was.
In all arguments on who's the GOAT is now rested after the last series.
Yeah.
5 minutes. Why you walk out, Skoo? Why you do that?
Huh?
I mean, I haven't watched basketball in a long time, but I heard about it. He walked off the court with 5 minutes left.
Basically twice, last night, and well, he didn't shake hands last night, but yeah, 5 minutes left in the game before.
Yeah, that's just
MJ would never do that.
No, he was too much of a competitor.
He forced other teams to do that.
Right, exactly. Like when the Pistons didn't shake Bulls' hands in 1990, I think it was.
Dave, who do you think we should have on the show next? I mean, it's going to be hard to top you. You got game.
You're too kind. That's a good question. I'll come up with some thoughts and email them.
You shoot it over to me. Okay.
Sure.
No, this is
actually. Let me say this. Yeah, one that comes to mind is a guy named Jim Campbell. He's a Lake Forest native, and and I mentioned his name. He just came out with a book on Bernie Madoff, who recently died, and we all know it was the world's biggest Ponzi scheme that Madoff was involved in. And I'm actually going to do an interview with him Wednesday in Chicago. I'm going to ask the questions and he'll give his answers. So that'll be sort of neat. And I'm happy to send you his contact information.
Oh, sweet.
Yeah.
Fantastic. We're just getting going here, Dave.
Right.
We're now, you got 2 books and, newspapers, author, and, and struck out Skoo.
He never could have swung at that pitch, Skoo.
Hey, Dave, thanks. David Sweet, thank you for coming on the show.
Oh, thanks, guys. This has been great. A lot of fun, great conversation. And, best of luck with everything going forward.
Thanks,
well,
David.
we're just going to keep grinding them out, and we're going to have you come back on again when we get that 3rd book. Give our regards to your better half.
I will, definitely, and same to you. And
congrats on the graduate.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, Ford Sweet, graduated from Forest Bluff, moving on to high school this fall. So
nice.
It's fun.
Oh, that makes it all worth it.
Exactly.
Thanks for listening to the Lake Forest Podcast. Please give us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts and smash that like button on Facebook, Instagram, and follow us on Twitter. Let us know what you'd like to hear about in the upcoming shows. Again, I'm Pete. Can be reached at pete@lakeforest.com. And then, Dave, if somebody wants to get a hold of you, what's the best way? Twitter?
I'd say via email is probably the best. And my email address is dafsweet, so DAFSWEET @AOL.com. I still have the long ago AOL.
AOL, yeah. God bless.
Does it make that noise when you log in?
Yeah. That finally went away.
And again, I'm Pete and can be reached at pete@lakeforestpodcast.com. The link will be in the podcast notes below, as well as links to David's 2 books and his bio. Fascinating fellow. On behalf of my co-host, Skoo Walker, we thank you for listening. Cue the Lake Forest Band.